A year ago, millions of women gathered in Washington, D.C., here in the Bay Area and around the world for the Women's March. They were rallying for women's rights, protesting President Trump's inauguration, and calling for greater political engagement by women from all walks of life. As organizers gear up to mark the first anniversary of that march this weekend, we look at the impact it's had on women entering the political arena and where the movement goes from here. I'm joined now by the president and founder of Emerge America, Andrea Dew Steele, the president of Democracy in Color, Aimee Allison, and the community advisor for Women's March San Jose, Chandra Brooks. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Chandra, the theme for this year's marches is Power to the Polls. What do you mean by that?
Well, we want to encourage everyone to get out to the polls and make sure they understand the issues that are important to vote on. So specifically that, and to ensure that people of color specifically are out there and understand that our vote is important, our vote matters, and we need to vote.
And Aimee, you're one of the guest speakers at the march.
San Francisco.
Yeah,
me and 80,000 of my closest friends are going to be in San Francisco, and I know Oakland and San Jose and communities all over California are going to be getting together.
So what are you going to say? What's your message going to be?
Okay, this is my message. California is, the women of California can lead in terms of demonstrating not just the resistance to Trump, but in instituting and bringing in a whole new wave of political leaders and political vision. I happen to believe that the Women's March at the one-year anniversary is the dawning of a new political and cultural era. And so when I went to DC and marched last year, we marched under a powerful intersectional, multiracial justice agenda. And that was a vision of politics that women are holding, particularly women of color, but women and men. I think those are the marching orders that the thousands that are gathering in San Francisco and beyond are giving to our elected leadership, as well as the new potential leadership. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. California is majority people of color, and women of color are so key in our state. And we saw in Alabama, they're key other places as well.
Yeah, the black women in Alabama made the difference in that race.
Can you believe black women were only 7% of the population in Alabama, and no Democrat of any race had won in a couple of decades, and yet with high voter turnout at 98%, that group of voters could swing an election and lead a multiracial coalition. And we believe that's the formula to win in swing states in the South and Southwest, like Florida and Georgia and Texas, but it's also the formula to win in Southern California and in the Central Valley, where Republicans are sitting on top of districts that Clinton won. So we believe that that is power to the polls is really about that in our own state.
Well, Andrea, your group, Emerge America, works with women who want to run for office. You give them training and you really usher them through the process. In fact, your group worked with a couple of politicians here in the Bay Area.
Absolutely.
Mayor Libby Schaaf and also London Breed in San Francisco.
So, and Chandra, don't forget.
And Chandra as well, yes.
I have never seen this kind of interest in running for office. The biggest reason we don't have more women in office is because not enough women want to run. And with the election of number 45, we have women all over the country rising up and saying, I can do this. I want to help my community. I want to help my country. And the barriers that traditionally have kept women back, those barriers like being qualified, now they say, look who's in the White House. Of course I can do this. I'm qualified. And issues like fundraising, other issues that we work on in our training program, our 6-month training program, to try to help them work through some of those barriers. We just had our first class in Alabama. We launched in Alabama. We added 7 new states since the election. So we're now operating in 24 states. And the first class of Alabama, it's a perfect example of not just women voting and African American women. Half of that class is African American. They are deciding to run for office.
And what kind of increase are you seeing in terms of the women who are running, in terms of the numbers of women running, and also the backgrounds they come from?
Well, we are seeing a tremendous increase in the women running. Just today, we have 307 Emerge alumni running all over the country. About 4 days ago, it was 258. So we're seeing every day, honestly, every day.
Quite an increase in just days.
What's so amazing, now, I don't know if you're old enough, but I'm old enough to remember the Anita Hill hearings. And I was in college and watched how a panel of all white men, senators, did not believe her claims of sexual harassment and really tried to destroy her character. And I was there to witness, you know, the bumper stickers, I believe, Anita, and the wave of women who rode that anger, that righteous fury to the polls into office. And if that was a wave back in the 90s, what we're seeing now is a tsunami.
Yes.
We are seeing a tsunami.
Yes.
And women of color have, even though they're the staunchest and most loyal Democrats, and black women in particular, as the highest vote turnout of any race and gender, we find even within the Democratic Party, they're the most primaried group, meaning they are most likely to face gatekeepers that prevent them from getting into office. So getting people one by one prepared is critically important, and really challenging the vehicles, the political vehicles, the donors, the organizations who support and elevate leadership to really look at who is going to show up and who's going to be the center of this new era we're talking about.
But let me ask,
we should talk about
well,
that.
let me ask you this, though. How unified is the women's movement?
We're transitioning from a women's movement to a movement of women. And what you're seeing with the Women's March that's happening this weekend is a broad-based justice political agenda that's not narrowly focused on abortion rights and others, but is talking about criminal justice reform, it's talking about education, it's talking about immigrant rights, it's involved in DACA. And that's, I think, the transition that we're in. And I think the possibilities there are tremendous, but we as women have to talk about it amongst ourselves and recognize that we're moving into a movement of women, and that's the movement that's going to be sustained and long-lasting and more unified over time.
And Andrea, so then what will you use as a benchmark for success?
There are 520,000 elected offices in this country. And certainly success, I'd love to see 50% of our political offices held by women. Definitely.
But realistically, what do you think you'll be able to get this year?
This year, I would say that we're definitely going for 30%. We'd like to see, that's really the tipping point in institutions, when you can have 30% of a state legislature, 30% of an elected body, that's really when you can see tremendous changes. Because what we're going for is not just having women in office. We want to see policy changes. We're the only country in the world, the only developed country without a federal maternity leave policy. We have the highest maternal death rate in the developing world. So we're really getting women in office because we want to see policy outcomes, and certainly it takes a number of them to do that. But I feel like if we could get 30%, we'd be on our way.
So what are the biggest challenges or hurdles or barriers that remain for female candidates?
There are many barriers. There's a cost of being a candidate, which is often not talked about. You know, your flexibility with your job, the cost of having, you know, being able to attend events, childcare. There's a lot there, and women who run for office have to understand and prepare for that. But it's not impossible. There's an amazing, newly sworn-in California state legislator named Winnie Carrillo out of LA. She represents the Koreatown downtown area. She's formerly undocumented. She carries a broad-based agenda. She doesn't come from money, and she just won by knocking on doors and just working really hard and meeting the right people. We need about 1,000 more Wendy Carrillos in office in California for us to really have the representation.
All right. And on that grassroots lesson, we are going to leave it. Aimee Allison with Democracy in Color, and also Andrea Dew Steele of Emerge America, and Chandra Brooks of Women's March San Jose. Thank you all for that lively discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
High five.
You're too far away.